Hello, LinkedIn. Thanks for joining us on our second LinkedIn Live, one of many to come. Today, we are going to do AI, data, and analytics. We're going to do a touch of accounting, and this is ahead of our full accounting suite that's going to be launching at the end of Q1, so stay tuned for more demos on that. But while we wait for everyone to join here, I'm going to intro my esteemed colleagues. I'm going to have them give their background and a little bit about themselves, and then also a little bit about what we're going to demo today. I'll pull it back here, and we will get into the meat and potatoes of their genius innovations. So, Lisa, let's have you go first. Give us your intro.
Hi, Lisa Wardlaw. Very nice to be here today. Welcome to all the LinkedIn guests. Love doing lives, and especially with you, Margot and Lindsay. Could not be more excited about what we're going to uncover today. I am the Chief Operating Officer at Irys, and in my role, work on technology, work on a lot of things accounting, supporting Lindsay and team, and just innovation and how we're going to bring newly emerging things into the market to improve all things insurance distribution. So very excited to be here today. And clearly I'll be supporting Lindsay and Margot in data, AI, analytics, and accounting with a heavy role on be taking some of my role from sitting in the C-suite at some of the companies I used to work with, both in the reinsurance carrier space, and how do we think about data, AI, and analytics from the perspective of I'll call it just an executive lens. So what is it that we like to see in our data? What is it that we typically ask people for that maybe sometimes it takes them a while to be able to provide that information to us? So I'll be supporting Lindsay and Margot with that lens today here on LinkedIn Live.
My turn. Hi, everybody. Lindsay Strong, Chief Product Officer here at Irys. My role is really exciting after being in insurance for 25 years on the opposite side of where Lisa was. So I'm over with Margot on the agent and broker side. So we get to find all of those terrible things that we've been dealing with and all the problems that we've had as brokers and basically sling them over the fence and say, Lisa, help us fix them. So technology team, here are all the many, many problems that we know exist. This is how we would like to go about fixing them. Now let's do it. So just, a small ask, clearly.
But, just a little one.
But we're making huge strides.
Awesome. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Margot Giles. I'm the founder and CEO of Irys InsurTech. And I have spent most of my career in the broker seat and on the distribution side. And you guys probably heard that story a million times, and I don't feel like telling it again. So look it up. But I think we're ready to get into the meat and potatoes of what we're going to show today. So I'm going to have Lindsay take the wheel here as our Chief Product Officer. Lisa's going to be here to back and give you my 2 cents on everything. But yeah, go ahead, Lindsay. Let's take it away.
So we're going to be jumping into a few dashboards to start our session. We're going to take a look at what analytics and actually viewing the data that's inside of Irys looks like. And then we'll take a journey through looking at other data that is not just dashboard centric. So I'll go ahead and pull that up.
Awesome. Lindsay, while you're pulling that up, it's awesome to remind everybody that the upside of LinkedIn Live is that we can interact with you. So please make sure you're adding questions and comments in the chat, and we will do our best to answer them for you. And I am really excited to see what you got. So let's do it.
Great. So what we're looking at here is an example of one of our many dashboards that are tailored to suit the different users within an organization. I'm actually going to jump into a opportunities dashboard. So this would fit the persona of potentially a salesperson within the organization. As an individual user, I might be able to see my pipeline, see where my revenue is coming, when it's coming, what to expect, and then have a kind of higher level overview into things that I might not necessarily have day-to-day insights into, like premium by carrier, because maybe I need to go ask a favor and I need to know who we're doing the most business with. Day-to-day, what are my upcoming expirations outside of new business? What do I also need to be paying attention to? So all of this that you see in here is configurable. You can, as a tenant, determine what you want to show up for each of your personas. And they can be curated further as well. So you can add filters to these. We can embed additional drill downs. So if we look at an individual carrier in this case, We have a drill down that shows the average number of days it takes to close a quote for each of the carriers, which again, if I need quick turnaround on something, is really beneficial. I can also get really nice insights into my data. So instead of having to think about what we need to ask the data, it's actually going to tell us, which is something that I've never been able to do before. I always have to have intentionality behind what it is that I need, and then go pull a report, export it to Excel, and then manipulate it to get the eventual outcome. Irys is, in this case, actually telling you things that you may not even know or think to go ask. And in this case, it's very valuable information, not only about growth, anomalies that you can see, or it's actually making predictions about future things that we haven't been able to do before either.
So Lindsay, one thing is, of course, on a screen that's bigger, but maybe if you could read what those insights kind of categories are, because it's a little tiny. And I know them because we talk about them all the time when we talk about how exciting those insights are. But I was just thinking maybe to some of our guests, they might not be, or they might be like me and needing readers at this stage in their lives. But I don't know if you can drill in on those a little bit. I was just thinking about that when you were explaining it.
Yeah, I zoomed in a little bit more as far as it will let me. But yes, so we've got anomalies. So new business is lower than predicted, which is something that we might need to know, especially if we had forecasted a certain way. We have some information on growth, so our growth rates and when the highest growth rate was. And then the prediction is forecasting our new business written for the future month, which would be next month in February. And then the more data it has and the more data it sees, these predictions and anomalies are constantly updating. So the insights are continuing to change, and you're always seeing new information that's valuable to you. Zoom back out. Okay, so again, all of these are configurable. We can really easily drill down into certain date and time periods. If we just wanted to go through the month of November, you don't have to go change the actual dashlet. You can drill in directly in that. All of this is controlled by permissions of all of your users, so you're never going to access data that you don't have permission to see, which makes it super secure. And it also means that instead of me as a user who typically hasn't had access to real-time insights, data, and reports, I can now get real-time feedback without having to go ask somebody else for a report that they then create, export to Excel, hand to me, and the data is immediately dead the second that I receive it. And any change after that, I can't account for. So this is all real time. There is no missing data. The second that something is updated in Irys, it exists on the dashboard.
Lindsay and Margaret, I would love to just ask you both like a question about that, especially kind of coming from the, how important data is and how we like to see data, like as an executive, as the user, as the manager, as the P&L owner. Lindsay, when we hear things like dashboards, I think the mental image that most people probably have are, okay, like, yeah, I'm with you. I have to go in. I have to decide what I want. I need to open an IT ticket that goes to like, I'll say some sort of a reporting queue, whether it's, a reporting team or maybe a SME that is a reporting expert, or maybe somebody that knows your data warehouse or your data, and then they go and they basically do this thing called create a report. And then that report is typically pushed out to the users. And that takes a long time. How can maybe you all, articulate what this really is? Because I think, of course, it's still a dashboard. But how is this different than that type of a static, ask once for what you want, hope you get it, and then live with it for the rest of your life concept? And I'd love to hear both of your perspectives from being leaders in agencies and brokerages.
Yeah, Margaret, you want to take this on?
Yeah, Lisa, to your point about like, what does it mean in the actual usage and flow of like how this would affect a user's day or even like an executive's day. So, as a C-level executive on the brokerage side, I was living in dashboards and reports. I mean, I was rarely in the actual system and transacting day-to-day stuff. So this was really my domain. So for even companies that are even slightly more technically sophisticated, where maybe they have some kind of a Power BI or they've got some analytics software, it usually still requires a pretty steep learning curve. So yeah, you have a dashboard and maybe we don't need to go through the process of putting a ticket in, but I still need to understand how to write the syntax and how to query the system correctly. And that is, for executives, like who wants to spend like 30 minutes trying to find the data to put into the report to actually get it. So I think where we focused a lot of our energy on the build here was how do we get this to be as intuitive as humanly possible so that if I need that information, regardless of my skill level on the tech side, how do I get it as quickly as possible? And I think Lindsay did a fantastic job of delivering that.
One of the most exciting things to kind of bookend all of that is the learning curve, the configuration of external analytics platforms. Is that not only there's not a steep learning curve, but we can now speak to the data. So we're not having to go learn how to use a very complex analytics system. We can, as humans, ask human questions of the data, and it will help us build the dashlets and or additional dashboards that we want to add to have access to. So I'm just going to throw in an example. So how many Ford F-150 vehicles do we insure? So I know, Margot, you use this as an example all the time. Like, what if you wanted to send a notification to all of your clients that had a Ford F-150 with a massive recall? How do you do that today? I don't know, because it's on spreadsheets, first and foremost. But
that's if you're lucky it's in a spreadsheet. Okay, let's be real there.
So that's first and foremost.
Why do I see that like hamster on the wheel meme when you say that, Lindsay?
So now that we've asked the question, Irys will present back the basically the configuration of our widget for us, so we can further add more details, more metrics, more groupings. So what we're showing in here is that we have 5 total F-150s. Perhaps if I wanted to add the insured name to this, so I can see how many insureds those 5 go over. So we have 3 with Amelia Brooks and 2 with Tech Solutions. Again, we can add whatever else we want to this widget, but ultimately, once we're done configuring what we want to go in here, which should be fairly simple, given that we asked, again, in human language, real human language, to create a report for us, we can create this widget. And we'll give it a name. I know, it's really unique, Ford F-150 widget. And now that we created it, we can add it to that dashboard. So this is down at the bottom. Right now, based on the data set that it has found, it's determined what we wanted to see it in. So it said bar graph was the best way to visualize this data. If we didn't want to see it that way, we can change the way it looks. We can analyze the data further. We can go back in here and make more tweaks to it. But perhaps I don't want it in a bar graph. I want it in a donut because that just looks way cooler. Super easy to change. I can save it and go back to my dashboard and all the information's there. So for those people who aren't usually in an analytics platform, some of those do have a very steep learning curve. Having been there myself, I understand. This makes it much easier for users who are not accustomed to this type of interaction to get the data that they need without having to involve other team members as well, right? Because what we don't want is to introduce new technology that then takes 5 people huddled around a computer to try and figure out how to use it.
Yeah, and the other thing, Lindsay, just before you move on, the other thing that I really think is interesting about that, for all of our, people tuning in today is that, as an executive, I'm always asking questions in that moment based on something that happened that week or that month or even that day. I wake up that morning, I assume a lot of people, a lot of agencies, a lot of insurance people were probably wondering about Teslas and Teslas with exposure to water level, like right when the hurricanes were coming through and all that, Lindsay. And so the ability to take something that's, I'll call it in the moment relevant, and have that reflect in your actual dashboard as something, as a dashlet. And then it can be here today, gone tomorrow. Meaning I was interested in that because I wanted to talk to Lindsay and Margot about it. And I wanted to visualize it, and I wanted it available. But you know what? Maybe next week or next month, I don't care about it. So it wasn't this huge time intense, again, involvement. To your point, I think you used like 5+ resources, Lindsay, or something like that. It wasn't this point of no return investment. It was literally, I was curious about it. I wanted to know about it. It suggested, I love the way it suggested, because I like this. I usually like the suggestions, but then you're right, Lindsay. Sometimes I just naturally prefer donuts or versus bar charts. But then it can also be gone tomorrow, or it can stay. So I just wanted to emphasize that, because I think the way you've designed that as it could stay forever, or it can be gone tomorrow, or you could actually just be doing it for something that you want to meet with a client, or you want to meet with your boss, or you want to meet with your staff or your team. I think that that's really impactful, and it's so low touch.
It is. One of the things I really like about it is you can configure or create those little dashlets on the screen. And oftentimes, we create reports for ourselves and nobody else gets to see it. Once that dashlet exists, you can allow other people to also use their dashlets on their own dashboards. So it doesn't have to be in the one static place. You can share that amongst your entire organization as well.
So that's really cool if you think about it from like an executive perspective, right? Like either as the manager, or you're meeting with, let's just say you're meeting with, C-suite or whatever, and you want to create a dashlet. And Lindsay, to your point about inclusion, I really like that. You want everyone on your team to have that same dashlet before you go into that meeting. So it's not like one person has, the magical dashlet and everybody else doesn't. So you could share that out, and then everyone has the same data. And I think the really cool thing is that's actually linked to the data directly. It's not like it's this, like Excel, right? Where it statically pasted it into a report. It's literally like live. So everyone could view that on their dashlet real time. Super cool.
Yeah, absolutely. So the next view we're going to look at is actually the management dashboard. And I don't know about you guys, but having to get oversight or any information about larger groups of people is always very difficult. How do we see it at a high level? How do we drill down without creating just a multitude of reports that go into a massive amount of detail and then have to try and manage all of those independently? So what we're looking at is that oversight, again, curated to see larger groups of people and then being able to drill into data specifically that we're looking for.
Yeah. And as somebody that likes to manage data and analytics, this lens is probably one of my favorite from that kind of management leadership lens, because of course, Lindsay, I like looking at the funnel, and like, I like the side by side with the line of business, because I'm always going to look at multiple dimensions together. Like, what's it telling me? And so if you maybe could show everyone today, like, let's just say you and I wanted to look at, I don't know, pick a category, Lindsay. Do we want to look at closed one? What do you think?
Let's take a look.
And I like how it like automatically changed the line of business between the category we picked. And then let's say that we wanted to, I don't know, Lindsay, let's pick one line of business. For me, it doesn't really even matter. Maybe we wanted to click into one of those.
Yeah, let's go look at personal also. So now it has curated and filtered everything else in this dashboard to not only that closed one category, but also that specific line of business. So we've gone from the very top all the way down.
And I think the thing that's super cool about that is that we haven't lost the ability to go back up. So, and we're in the same view, because I don't know, something is looking peculiar, or something looking odd, or you're sitting in a meeting and your manager or your line leader, your P&L regional leader is asking you questions, and You could be on your laptop. You could be on your, whatever device you want to be on, and you could be just clicking through it and answering those questions real time.
Yep, absolutely. And again, all of this information is, you can configure these widgets to look certain ways. Just like we were able to filter the funnel, for example, you can do the same thing with some of the tables. So if we wanted to drill down into a specific producer, for example, instead of just seeing the table of everybody, I can drill down to a specific person. It didn't require a separate report. It's a filter that can be applied. And the second that I'm done seeing this particular view, I can just turn that filter off. Or maybe I want to see a group of people and I can select more than one. Again, very, very easy to get that information. This same type, we have basically the persona and broken down into sections. So now we've moved into performance of these individuals. So policies won by agency or by agent, the close ratios themselves, participants and revenue splits of those participants, because producers are not the only ones involved in the sales. How successful are you based on the other team members taking this across the finish line? Again, that's something that we don't typically track within organizations because it's just at that producer level as we track during the funnel, but how are your CSRs and your account managers bringing value to that process? We can see regional revenue split, which I know you guys have an upcoming session around M&A. How do we see revenue and premium by region? How difficult is that today? All of this makes it very easy to see not only the divisions by region, but also how does that break down by line of business? Where is somebody more successful? Can we perhaps bring some of their skill set or their insight into some of the other regions that are not doing so well in those lines to share with the team?
And the other thing there, Lindsay, that I've always thought was interesting, right, is just from not only when we look at data, but when we look at resources and when we look at, margin coming out of certain regions, when we think about, we call it like allocations, when we think about like maybe shared service centers, like processing centers or CSRs or accounting. And we always think about like, well, how do we allocate that? Like, how do we understand which unit's driving what? And clearly we're doing it from the back end, but I love the ability to look at these splits, and it could be people, it could be revenue based, like clearly it's showing revenue based here, but we're able to see, kind of in real time what's going on with those splits. And it helps us drill into cyclicality, into as well as, maybe resource needs, maybe different margins, maybe different areas of focus. And I know, Margot, from all your background in M&A, I think this is a really interesting way to just be able to look at something very quickly, very cohesively. And the thing I think I love about it the most is that everyone from the top of the organization all the way down has the same view of the same data with appropriate permissions.
So Lisa, when you bring up M&A, it's important to understand there's a lot of BI tools on the market. There's a lot of, well, we can visualize the data, but what did Irys do that was so specific where we can actually get this data? Like, what are some of the underpinning things that we're collecting, and why is it so much easier to use a system like this than just a typical BI tool?
Yeah. Lindsay, do you want to Wonder Twin Power activate that one?
Wonder Twin Power activate? Yes.
I mean, I can take it from the data and the foundation, and then Lindsay, I'll hand it over to you on data quality and then making it easy for the users and that intuitiveness and kind of that elegance of, being able to have something just effortlessly. So I'll just take it from I'll take this lens, I'll put on my like little nerdy, like technical hat, which I know most people are like, oh, I'm techie. So I'll try to not use buzzwords and I'll try to not be too detailed, but at the highest level, this is not achievable without what I'd like to use is decentralized. And by decentralized, I mean, in Irys, we have the ability to look at things where they are and still pull all those cohesively together. most reporting tools that Margot was referring to still require some sense of a data warehouse or a central container. And I'm just using, big words that we would all hear of, one version of the truth. And so one really important thing for us is we want to meet everyone where they are and where your data is. And also we believe fundamentally in a concept of sustainability. So like, let's leave data where it is and as much as possible, not have to move, lift, shift, and translate data high level. That in our nerdy tech world, that's called ETL, extract, translate, load. And the more we do that, the more time to seeing that data. So for everybody who's like, I don't care about tech, it's speed, it's efficiency, right? So first of all, we want to do that. Secondly, and I'll speed this up, I don't want to make it too techy. The second thing that we have to do is harmonize that data. So we have to apply master data management. We have to apply security to that. Who should be able to see what data? How is that data permissioned? And then we have to make sure that we are applying data governance on top. Survivorship rules, how many versions of Lisa Wardlaw can you have in your system? Is that Lisa Wardlaw? Is that another version? I get a lot of that other version's emails, just for the record, on my personal email. But in Irys, we want to make sure that basically all of this sits on top of a very robust data foundation. I think that goes without saying, but I just wanted to emphasize that. And then we continually look at that data quality. And then the last thing that I'm going to hand it over to Lindsay on is we believe very foundationally in our security and making sure that our data, because all this really cool stuff with AI can go really bad really fast if you don't have impeccable security. And so we really have this concept of not persisting our data in any reporting tool. And by that, for laymen, what I mean is we don't lift and shift Irys's data to a reporting tool's database so that data can then coexist or redundantly sit in another tool's database, which all the BI tools that Margot mentioned actually do require. So we worked a lot on that architecturally, but that really isn't the cool part. That's just me saying, hey, Lindsay, the car works. Now, how can you make the car drive and perform and be really elegant? So I'll hand it over to you for that, Lindsay.
I think all of that is pretty cool. I mean, it got us to what you can see, which is very impressive. I think, like you talked about the data quality, it's extraordinarily, a large part of what makes this work so well, because without constant data cleansing and ensuring that we have one version of every person, every entity, we couldn't do the correct analytics that we're seeing. It would just be as we've had before, which is 1,000 versions of a person, and therefore we've got an inflated number.
Real quick, I want to put in here, but like that's because typically when people say data cleansing, they're thinking, well, I have a group of people that are constantly matching and merging, or once a quarter or once a year we do a clean. So like, what is it? Like Irys is not requiring human intervention for any of this data cleaning.
No.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
That's the wonderful thing. Yeah, it's a huge deal because yes, you're right. And, it's typically we look at our data when we move from one system to another, or we have some push this quarter to make sure all of the FEIN numbers are filled in, right? It's one of those things that we know data is a problem, but it takes a lot of time and effort and human capital, which we can't afford. So we'll kind of piecemeal it here and there, and eventually we'll get somewhere kind of like, okay, we accept this mid data that we have. And then there's the other data quality issues that we just have no way around. For example, we've created multiple of the same customer within a platform because every department that's handling that customer wants their own version of it. So therefore that customer exists multiple times. And that's a decision that we've made and we're living with as a result of it. But what happens when you want to see the value of that single customer when there are really 4 or 5 different customers within your platform? So we've negated all of that by building the foundation correctly from the start so that it basically eliminates the need for any of those workarounds, which means by the time you get to this highest level and we want to see the analytics and we want to see the outcome of it, it all makes sense. And it's real. And we can make decisions now based on it, which we never really could before. we could kind of see how things might go with a 20 or 30% swing in either direction for any decisions that we made, but it wasn't really accurate enough. So we've been able to make huge strides there. And just simple things like, Lisa, segments in Irys, right? We've created the ability for tenants to create their own segments, which is what we think of as like somebody's different departments or locations or divisions or cost centers or profit centers. Before, that may have been a repurposed field that was never intended to manage that thing, but there was no other way to manage it. But it's curated at the tenant level. So now you can literally slice and dice this however you want and make it meaningful for you as a tenant of Irys, and not us forcing you to curate it.
Lisa, and I want you to come in a little bit here, because you ran huge organizations on a C level, right? And so you had a ton of segments underneath you. What does this mean to a larger organization?
So, I mean, and I'm not trying to skip to accounting, but I'm going to kind of join what we're talking about here. So we've always had to make, historically, trade-offs, because, if you just think about it, you have legal entities and you probably have some sort of like hold companies. You have acquired entities that you're trying to track and roll off, and you're also trying to like say, well, this is now part of the Southeast region or maybe the Northwest. And so there's this dimensionality in production areas, production zones, regions, whatever you want to call it. Then, of course, Margo, you have functions, and we were alluding to it a little bit, right? Like, consider it like profit centers, and then consider cost centers. And then how do you map all this together? Then, of course, you have, well, like, how do I want to manage my business? And one of the things that we struggled with, again, some of the largest carriers and reinsurers in the world, we struggled with concepts of buying blocks of business, running them off, adhering to the contractual, whatever it was, commission arrangements that they had that were active until certain times. Under Irys, the way we've designed this is that you can have elasticity and fluidity with all of those dimensions. And then to Lindsay's point, whatever dimensions you want that we maybe haven't articulated on this, I'm just giving you illustrations, Margo and Lindsay, that permeate the data. So the data isn't like what Lindsay just mentioned earlier. You have to make a choice in old systems to say, well, I want this customer to belong to this thing. Call it a one-to-one. In Irys, we have a many-to-one relationship. So that customer, that block of business, that contract, that region can be associated with many things. So I think of that as many to many. And Margo, I think that changes the game. That changes the game for the way we manage our business, the way we actually manage our business. I think technology limited us to manage the business the way the technology worked. And then we tried to do all these workarounds with reporting, Lindsay. And I think now we manage our business in all the dimensions that we want to manage our business on. And the reporting just visualizes the way we want to manage our business. Did that answer your question, Margo?
Yeah, it was perfect. Thank you. I was getting to that, the whole point of, we're looking at it from how do you want to run the business, and then let's support you doing that, and not here's the rigid structure that our technology kind of caps out at. Hope you can figure out how to shove it in there, which is just a very different outlook on everything. Yeah.
No more square peg round hole. So looking at the rest of this dashboard, again, we can see insights into other things here as well. So when we look at overdue tasks, what do we have outstanding? Who's responsible for the things that are overdue? What do we need to pay attention to? Again, as managers, very important to see at a high level, who do we need to be focusing on? Who might need assistance? Some other information here, quotes by line of business and carrier. What does that breakdown look like within a certain time period? Might be helpful. We can see a book of business Again, you can then filter and get whatever you need out of it without having to export it somewhere. You can do it all from here. Really easily, you can add filters specifically. So you can change effective date filters. You can add additional filters here as well if you want to. And as Lisa mentioned before, again, you can use them once, you can toggle them on and off and make them available or not. It's very, very flexible. And then we get into really interesting things that we haven't had a lot of insight into before when we think about assets, real tangible property. Again, most of it previously was living on spreadsheets, and we're going to talk about how that no longer needs to be the case. But now that we have this data, let's see what it means to us. So how many vehicles do we have insured? What are the vehicle types? We have here a heat map of all of our assets by city. So we can see that concentration of risk. Where do we have the most drivers? Whatever data makes most sense to you to see in these types of widgets, but definitely concentration of risk. That's very difficult to see today if you have everything on statement of values and in spreadsheets. But I know there are probably some people, perhaps in California right now, who would really like to know where their concentration of risk is. As we get that hurricane hurtling towards us, Margot, what does our book look like? Is it all in that red state in the right-hand corner down at the bottom there? And then, again, just the breakdown of vehicles to individual entities and or people. Again, just the fact that we have access to the data and we can visualize it however we need to.
And I'm going to apologize because it's probably pretty obvious that I'm having computer issues, so I'm going to try to get through my question really fast. But when you say assets, we don't just mean vehicles and homes. Like, we mean assets, right? Like, everything in our system is an asset, and it's a unique asset. So what I find interesting is that as these assets might actually move from customer to customer, maybe you sell a house between two, like, these things are still being tracked and traced. And I've never been able to see the analytics on something like that before, especially like you said, with everything being buried in statement of values. It's a different world.
Yeah,
it is very much so.
And I think it's really interesting. So, Margot and Lindsay, from some of the lenses, I used to look at this from carrier and reinsurer level, right? We of course, we eat, sleep, and drink concentration of risk. So portfolio management is where we come from. But think about it as cross-pollination of risk. So think about it as you see concentration in California or Florida, and a storm's coming through. Well, the asset itself is not just at risk, but potentially, let's take 9/11 as example, or in some other things, right? You could also look at premium payment, and maybe the government is going to say, hey, we're going to issue 30-day reprieves on premium payment or whatever. You now have a concentration of risk, those things as well. And so usually what gets complicated, of course, I'm not telling you all things that you don't know, but it's like the layering of risk, and it's these events that layer on top of one another. So we may be looking at, where do we have risk exposure? We may also be looking at, where do we have premium payment exposure? We may be looking at, where are carriers located? Where are their payment shops located? We may have some delayed payment term exposure for our commissions. If, whatever, I'll pick an insurance carrier. I won't name names on a demo, but maybe somebody is California based, and not that they don't have banks all over, but maybe they need a little bit of a reprieve given everything going on there right now, right? There's just so much information that as an executive, I could walk into a meeting and now ask my team, whether it's my sales team, whether it's my service team, whether it's my financial team, and that one diagram can lend me to flip across all those different dimensions as I'm managing my book of business. And I think that's really powerful, and often underappreciated. Oh, Lindsay,
it's amazing.
Some accounting.
Yeah, this is now the Lisa show.
She loves it when I talk debits and credits. No, I'm joking. I think one of probably our I'll say like our greatest joys, Lindsay and Margot, has been intuitively connecting the accounting to the business, making it not this back end function that's done. It's important, but it's done in the back end, and it's done with a lot of manual workaround, and it's done with a lot of, time delay and not real time. So one of the first things that we did was, of course, you'll all be hearing more about this, but we talk about it a lot. We have this concept of event-based accounting. And again, just to break that down, what that means is, as any transaction, any operational process is occurring in Irys, you're receiving a download, you're creating an opportunity, you're going out for quotes. All of those things are creating real-time accounting. And the thing that I love about this dashboard in particular, Lindsay, is it's showing you that accounting with, so that pipeline that Lindsay showed earlier on the, operational leadership dashboard and managerial dashboard is now showing up in this thing called forecasted revenue. So you can see premium, which of course is gross written premium. And you can see revenue. We call it revenue because it's a combination of all agency revenue. So that would be consulting revenue, commission revenue, et cetera. And you see that category called forecast. Not this, take a spreadsheet, think of what you've got, think of what you had last year, and maybe increase it by 5% or like whatever. This is literally like everything your team is actively working on in pipeline that we've converted into forecasted revenue. And that's actually able to then be used in your forecast and plan financial reporting. So we've integrated the front end with the back end. So I really like that, Lindsay. And, as you drill in there, you can see that, that premium, and you can see it both for different groups. Like, so how is that split? Yeah, I love it. And you're doing it now by line of business, which is, there's all these different views. Like, how do we want to look at that? Do we want to look at that for PW? Do we want to look at that for homeowners? What analysis do we want to apply on that? Which I think is super helpful. And I just want to, Lindsay, take everyone kind of left to right. Then we have this category called estimated. And okay, when we move into a bind and we've, either direct bill or agency bill, but that is like premium, we are binding that policy. It is contractually being bound. Commission's not yet settled with the broker or agency, but we have bound that policy. We move from forecasted into estimated revenue. And again, you see the revenue and then you see the premium. While the premium, of course, isn't in the agency balance sheet and income statement, it is a driving of how we're hitting our targets and what our GWP thresholds are. Of course, it drives commission calculation. Carry that into this analysis. But you can see commissions in there. And that's total commissions to the agency. We're going to talk about splits in a moment, which is like what are total commissions versus what do we need to pay our producers for their share of those commissions. But I think it's really interesting to know that we take that in as estimated. So it flips from a forecast into an estimated. And when we do all that, we do not only the estimated revenue and estimated expense for what we need to pay our producers, but we also do all the associated liabilities. So clearly we have a receivable from the carriers, and I'm going to get to how we settle that in just a moment. And then we have a payable to our producers. And for those of you who may pay based on draws and all the other stuff, we have a very sophisticated way we handle what they're owed actual versus what their draw in that reconciliation is. We won't bore you with that. That could be a whole accounting webinar. But if we move from estimated, we carry an estimated, and I just want to indicate that we can track what is not being bound. So what was forecasted that did not make its way into estimated. So I always think about that as expected but unplaced or unbound business. And so that's really important. So this lineage is really neat to follow it throughout the life cycle, but also understand that this lineage creates the ability to compare or what line of business is having, the lowest placement rates. Why did we think of this as forecasted but not placed? what carriers are having the lowest place once we got to an accepted proposal, right? These are all things that we can analyze because we're tracking the data throughout the entire value chain, and we're doing all the financial accounting on it. Okay, so then the last category that I just want to take everyone through is when the carrier pays the agency and the broker for that commission, we move it from estimated to settled. And we do an automatic reconciliation on that through a tool that we use where we call it transaction match. We do a detailed reconciliation on that. When that reconciliation shows alignment, and for all people who process suspense today, you don't have to manually do lots of suspense transactions. We have, like, on average, an initial target auto match rate of like 95%. So you do have to deal with minimal suspense, but not 100% of suspense. I just wanted to make a plug for my accounting people out there. That moves into what we called settled. So the really amazing visual here is from a CFO, controller, regional accounting controller, regional accounting manager. You can see your entire broker and agency's book of business. You can see everything everybody is producing, all the way from opportunity, not bind, all the way from opportunity, all the way through the entire value chain. And you can do lots of metrics. Why hasn't it settled yet? What is time to settle? How much are we off? Margo and I often talk about this. If you're accepting a threshold of plus or minus 5% between your estimate and your settled, what is that write-off? What is the plus or minus 5%? Which carriers have the biggest acceptable write-offs? Then you go talk to your carriers about that. So I just wanted to double down and emphasize the whole point of this is so that you can, we call it revenue traceability throughout the entire value chain. And so Lindsay and Margo, before we go into some of these other splits, I'll just see if you all have any questions for me on this, because I think of this as being very powerful. And my guess is not something that people have had at their fingertips.
Well, I'll go into, as the consummate salesperson and the one that's constantly looking at this forecasted revenue, because it's something that we've never been able to see before. Then Lindsay, I think you do a great job of this. When I think of forecasted revenue, I think my producer is going to slap a number on a spreadsheet, what they think this potential prospect is going to spend. And it's this kind of made up number, and I don't really want to take it into consideration. That is not how we get to forecasted revenue. So if you could walk everybody through how it starts, and then how we actually get to that revenue, and then, or that forecasted revenue, but then how it gets refined by technology over the process of taking something to market and then finally binding it. I think that's really critical.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the best parts of it is that it's just happening as you're working the opportunities through the pipeline. So it's not an intentional thing that a user is having to remember to update or make changes to. As you work through the stages of an opportunity, the first part of an opportunity is anybody's best guess, right? When we first meet with somebody, we think, okay, here's a revenue amount, here's a premium amount. It's probably where we're headed. And that's the very first part of our kind of starting point for estimating. After that, as we work through the stages of submitting something to market, we've now kind of narrowed down what that looks like. As we get quotes back, we start taking kind of the averages of those quotes that are returned to us. So that then narrows in our funnel, not only the sales funnel going through that pipeline, but it's also narrowing our ability to more accurately predict what the outcome will be. And then as we go into presenting numbers, now we're not just taking averages of all of the quotes we potentially got, but maybe we're presenting two different market outcomes, narrowing it down further until the point where we're actually creating a policy. And in that case, like Lisa mentioned, we're moving from forecasted into estimated. So each one of these movements as they're happening is not requiring specific human intervention to say, I have to go fill in that field again or update this thing. It's just happening as a result of the work that we're doing. And I mean, that goes not only for this, but a lot of the other actions that we take inside of Irys, we're not having to go document or update somewhere else. It is part of our process flows.
Awesome.
Yeah, I mean,
that's
it's so
important
much
because
part
I
of
know a
our
lot of
process
people are going to
flows
say,
that
that's great. Yeah. Go ahead, Lisa.
yeah. I was just going to say, not only is it important to our process flow, there's the embedded connection is like the cerebral core. It's unbreakable. So like if your team is like coming to you as the CFO, and I'm, by the way, Margot, like, you know, with your sales hat on, my CFO hat on, I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna take a haircut on anything my salespeople tell me, because like, yawn, am I gonna believe that and tell my CEO that this is what our revenue is gonna be this quarter? I mean, no disrespect, Margot, on the sales side, but like, come on. So but in Irys, literally, that can't be something like that can't be something contrived. It's literally things that your teams are actively working on. The proposed and the average that Lindsay responded to are when you are selecting proposals to submit. So the financials are now cerebrally, like spinal alignment, aligned to what's going on. And I think that that's just so important, because I think the other big benefit of this, and I'm going to talk about it from the accountant side, and Lindsay, I assume that like producers feel this way too. There's just this inherent, why can't I see the numbers that accounting sees, and why can't accounting know the things that I see? And I think that's a constant tension. You see it with commissions, you see it with, did the carrier settle, and when am I up, or when am I going to get paid? And the core, I think that this is highlighting everyone, is not only 100% lineage, but 100% visibility. Clearly, you have to have the right permission. Like, you're not going to be able to see your neighbor's commissions if you're not in charge of that person and you don't have the rights to see their commission. So I don't want you to think you can just see everything. But between the person with the permission, it is 100% visible. And when you pick up the phone to call accounting, or you pick up the phone to call production, you see the exact same financials. That's what this dashboard is showing you. You're not seeing different numbers. So maybe, Lindsay,
Should we take a look
if
at some
you
splits?
don't mind, because we move into, go ahead. Maybe, Lindsay, if you don't mind. Okay, I think the other interesting thing, maybe, Lindsay, if we want to talk about line of business premium splits. So the first thing is, we'll take the gross written premium and we'll split it by line of business. We can split it by carrier. We can split it by region. I mean, to all the things Lindsay was showing on the, again, we do the exact same thing on the finance side, shocker. And we're looking at it as numbers, as targets. If you want to go talk to your top carriers and you're doing a top carrier roadshow, or you want to show them things, the financials are ready, that, you know, everything. And to Lindsay's point, if you want to talk to your data, it's the same thing. You talk to your data, you can create a dashlet of areas of interest. If you kind of click into that agent revenue split there, Lindsay, we have the split by producer. So what that is showing is that is taking a producer. Oh, you clicked back out. Okay, Lindsay clicked back out to get us into it. So the first thing, which I really like, is she's saying, like, this is Michael Smith, the producer, and this is Michael Smith's revenue split by line of business. And so we could click into any of those and see the transactions that make up that revenue split. And we could see that both from estimated and from settled, which I think is super important. And then if you back a little bit, she added a line of business. If you go back, you're now seeing, which I love too, because I love to look at, well, you know, if a carrier owes me this, in this case, this $10,543, what of that is agency? And then what of that is going to the producer? So I visualize that, which I actually like the donut for that, and saying, well, this is what's going to the house, as I like to call it. Because, you know, my CFO brain would let me think of nothing else. And then this is what it actually cost me, the agency, to produce that. I've got to scroll in a little bit. That $3,484. it cost me, the delta of that, which is somewhere in the neighborhood of like 6,000 if you kind of take that delta. And then it shows it by producer, by CSR. And if you remember when Lindsay was showing earlier, all those splits, because we track those splits in Irys, we're able to split that revenue. It's not a separate report. You don't have to go to this separate thing. You don't have to call accounting and say like, hey, really, the only people that would have this view to be able to see agency and producer by name would be the people that the broker and agency designated to be able to see that view. But Michael Smith, I think that's the one you had drilled in on, Lindsay. Michael would definitely be able to see Michael's numbers at his dashboard level, which I think is incredibly powerful. And Lindsay, I don't know, but I think that this is very cohesive to be able to look at and to be able to ask questions of without having to go back and forth between accounting and operations.
It helps immensely, yes.
All right. Again, we've got, you can see that bar chart. I'm always looking personally, what do I have coming on in terms of forecasted? Margo, that would be pipeline, that would be sales, what's coming on. And then I'm also very keenly focused on estimated. And the reason why the average days in stage is important, I'm looking at conversion between stages, and I'm looking at time to collect. And then, of course, as an accountant, you could throw in payment terms to this, split it by carrier, and then say, okay, how are my average days in stage connected to my agreed upon payment terms? Where are people falling ahead or behind? Which carriers are converting faster? Especially on things where you want to make sure that you're truing up your commissions to your employees. So, if it's all that's based on settled, we have the ability to look at that age and stage and settled and all those phone calls of, have they paid yet? What's the collection? When is it coming? That's all fully visible right here for your accountants and your regional controllers. It's also visible to Michael Smith on his. He can see, what was closed, one, and he can see what stage that is for that only in terms of settled in his portfolio. I think that's super powerful. And then, of course, Lindsay, if you keep going down, there's carrier. We can look by type. We could do any visuals we want. And then, of course, we can talk to that data. Just like Lindsay was talking to her data, we talk to that data in a similar way. So, yeah. Any questions, Lindsay, Margo, on that?
Very powerful stuff. And I never get excited about accounting, but this is a lot of fun.
Oh, Lindsay, you're gonna write the manual on debits and credits for agency accounting one day.
That's it. Well, I know we've spent a lot of time on analytics. Do we want to talk about a couple other really fun features of Irys?
Okay, Lindsay, before we hop into that screen, I know I'm looking at time. We're coming up on the hour. If everybody can hang on for 10 or 15 minutes, this is the coolest part of the demo, I promise. And I will let you guys take it away, but hang in there. And hopefully my computer will work and you won't have to look at me screen freeze for the next 15 minutes. Okay, back to you guys.
Okay, so what we've been looking at clearly, we have data in Irys and we're looking at all of that summarized visually, and it's fantastic. What happens with all the other data that is inside documents? It just stays there, right? Like it's always lived in documents and it stays there forever.
No, wait, it goes in somebody's either digital or physical file folder.
So clearly, this is something in terms of problems that we've had, over the decades in insurance. Everything's stuck in documents, whether it's policy documents, schedules of things, and unstructured data in these documents, be it in a PDF or an Excel spreadsheet or a Word document. It's really hard to then, get anything from those to make them meaningful. So what did we do, Lisa?
Well, of course, we had to throw some generative AI in this baby. No. So of course, I think it's interesting there's so many ways now to talk to your data. So the first thing that we did, just for everybody concerned, we made sure that anything that you're talking to in Irys is incredibly secure. So this is not ChatGPT, nor does, not that any employees would, but that technology is pretty powerful. You do not cut and paste anything into an open sourced chat model. So what we did was we put in a very restricted AI architecture. If you're curious, it's called retrieval augmented generation. So RAG AI architecture, so that we could create and formulate an intelligent companion. And we wanted to be able to compare documents. We wanted to be able to say, how can I stop eyeballing document A to document B, and again, a one-to-one and a one-to-many comparison. So the underlying foundation technology, I'll take my hat off in just a moment. I just want to make sure all the legalisms are there. I joke. All the technology is inside Irys. It's not open to the native world. It's only looking at documents that you have permission to see and look at, and it's only comparing documents and querying documents that you natively have permission to see and look at. So with that, Lindsay, I'll turn it back over to you, but I just think it's really important that I give that disclaimer, because please, nobody attending this today, do not go and cut and paste any of your documents into an open source solution.
Do not do that. Well, and for the less technical people who might be watching this at an agency, what this means is that anything that you put into Irys, any document that you drag and drop in, Irys is basically taking all of the data that's inside of that document and extracting it so we can then use it, like Lisa said, for our intelligent companion, which we'll look at in a second, and for document comparison. So it gives us the ability to now either compare documents that just exist in those files, that we're not doing anything, we don't have data in an actual database, they're truly just the files, or we can actually compare that data from files that exist outside of a database with data in a database. So it allows us to do multiple things. But what we're seeing in our example right here, we have two policies. We have the renewal policy, and this is the PDF. So you'll see we have a deck page in here after we get through all the fun cover pages. We've got some vehicles, and then we've got premiums, premium discount for pay in full. And then we have the expiring policy. So what we've done is extract all the data from it, which you can see on the right-hand side. And it's done a comparison side by side to say, this is where we found discrepancies. So again, today, I know that it's everybody's favorite thing to do is to review policies, whether it's short or a 600-page commercial policy with 300 vehicles that you have to go line by line and check VIN numbers. That's always fun. But having been there before, it's terrible. So basically, it's going to go through, compare line by line everything in the policy, and shows those discrepancies. So as you can see in here, it's found some discrepancies or some mismatches, and it's going to point those out so that you can very quickly see where those discrepancies lie and if there's something you actually need to take action on. So in this case, policy start and end date, clearly we expect those to be different, validly, since it's a renewal policy. So we're good to go, but at least it's shown us that that is a difference. Same thing with the account number. We can see the account number actually changed year over year. We may not need to do anything with that, but it's good to know. We can see in here that for the drivers and household members, that there is a discrepancy. So actually on the expiring policy, Mary Doe did not exist, but she is on the renewal. So clearly at some point in time that must have changed, but again, discrepancy that you can double check. And then we get into vehicles, coverage limits, premiums, and those types of things. I'm going to expand this one. There is no problem in this one. As you can see, nothing's red, but you can see it extracted all of those limits, deductibles, compared them side by side so that if there was a problem, you'd be able to see it really easily. But in this case, the place that we did find problems is going to be on the premium side for this Cherokee. And we can see the premium actually increased from last year. We know exactly where the premium increase lies, so you can go pinpoint it really easily. You don't have to go dig into racing worksheets somewhere. You can see it very quickly from here. And then in the premium summary, we can see there's an issue here as well. And we can see overall there was a premium change year over year. So again, makes it really easy to perform that policy checking, which is incredibly important for E&O purposes. Oftentimes we're shipping those out to other vendors as well. So that results in a potential huge cost savings for an organization. So super excited about that.
And Lindsay, just really quick, so this is...
Oh, go ahead, Margaret.
Sorry, Lisa, I got a delay. Life.
You're great. It's all good.
Meaning, typically what's happening is if you do have a third party engaged, or you've got maybe somebody has some, software that does this, but it's not embedded in the platform, and therefore it's a process to Lisa's point. Even if the doc is here, you have to extract the doc, then you got to move it over here to this other application. You're outside of your system. The data is not, we're not looking at it cohesively. And so just talk through a minute, what does it mean to have all of this now inside of your actual operating system, and how that differs from what people are doing today?
Yeah, so what that means is what we can do is not just a side-by-side comparison like this, but it's, first of all, within a workflow. So we're following a workflow. It's embedded in that workflow. The user isn't going and using a separate tool on a different website. It's all embedded in the same place. The outcomes of these comparisons are recorded for prosperity and, so that's all saved. It's not an additional step that they have to take. And then also we have the ability to compare up to 3 things simultaneously. So, again, as a user of this type of, need and tool, I'm not just typically comparing policy to policy year over year. I'm comparing, okay, what did we propose? What did we actually bind as in the database? And what is the policy we actually received, to make sure there's concurrency along all those 3 separate disparate things. And that's huge for us, because it just saves a massive amount of steps. And then just, again, to be buried inside of that workflow, not a separate tool, it makes usability significantly better for our tenants.
Yeah. And I just wanted to weigh in on 2 things that both you and Margot said. So from the, I grew up as an auditor and then an accountant, made my way to CFO. And I used to say to everyone, your biggest risk, which ties to the E&O and the perspective that Margot was bringing about it being on the side, your biggest risk is known unknowns. By that, hear me out. Somewhere, some process, someone has identified a discrepancy, something that doesn't work, something that's out of balance. So it's a known unknown, because that thing doesn't make its way back in to the workflow, to the process, to the resolution. And so we always used to say back in accounting, your biggest risk is the out of balance reconciliation item that nobody deals with, that they don't take a decision on, an active decision on. Because once it's known, meaning anywhere in your landscape, by any of your people, by any of your providers, by any of your Excel documents, that is basically it's an E&O risk if you don't deal with it, because it's a known unknown. And the thing I really appreciate about the intuitiveness of Irys is we were laser focused on known knowns. Everything is intuitively embedded in a workflow. Everything that the system knows. I think that is just so simple, but so hard to do in an elegant way that doesn't have you going over to this thing and going over here and going over there. And then, of course, like Lindsay, we then, of course, put our notarized E&O proof on top of it. So when Lindsay says, it's all here, everything that the users are doing, including this comparison, including resolving these, very red things that we either need to look at or we don't need to take action on, and the workflow helps you see that. It's all then notarized. So all the transactions that you're doing proves that your E&O is being accommodated and handled. And so I just wanted to kind of put that little cherry on top, Lindsay, with what you were saying. I think that that's so, so, so important. And often, maybe a lot of times in the tooling and all the workarounds and all the things that Margot was describing, we're focused on just how do we get the work done in a way that people can by tomorrow the work is done, or by the end of the week, or by the end of the month. But you have to make sure that work is done and known, right? Like it has to be organically included.
Exactly. Well, I'm going to jump in. I'm going to make this a little bigger so you can see it. But I'm also going to jump in now to our intelligent companion. So in the same vein as we're talking about extracting data from those documents that just live in the middle of nowhere and we can never do anything with them, because that data is now available for us to use and query, the intelligent companion gives us the capability of now talking to that data from documents, which is amazing.
So for the people in the comments too, intelligent companion is the working name for this feature that's getting ready to be released. I'd love a poll or a panel.
Should we give a prize for the person?
Yeah, like what do you?
Margaret wants a name.
Obviously, we got to name it, right? It's right now it's sitting as intelligent companion, but I think that there's a pretty
throw
cool
some names
name.
in the comments, Margot, and we could do a word plow after this with the names.
I love it.
That sounds really fun.
I think we are very creative. Intelligent companion. But what that means is it's not a robobot, it's not a chatbot, it is actually using generative AI. So while we name it, it is least intelligent.
So we're going to ask it some questions and see if it can come up with some answers for us. So we want to know how this customer can pay their premium. So we're going to ask, how can we actually make a payment to the carrier on this policy number? And it's going to tell us that based on this policy number, you would pay it at this website or by phone at this number. Super simple. That is buried inside the policy documents that we would have otherwise had to navigate to the record, go then pull it up, look through pages of a PDF, and it is now just available by querying our intelligent companion.
You beat me to it. I was going to ask, like, where is that coming from? It's like it's buried in a PDF somewhere.
It's coming from. It's
someone would have to go like pull it. First of all, you'd have to find whatever file that PDF may or may not be in, Margot, and then you'd have to open it up. Then you'd have to scan the document and find it. And so this is automatically facilitating that.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to ask what the most current policy term is. And so it's going to tell us based on that policy, it is 12/1 to 12/1/25.
And if I don't know if anybody remembers, was it last year? Last year at ITC, we actually demoed this on stage, on the demo stage. Lindsay, do you remember? And back then we had a different name for the intelligent companion and an icon. But we were using it in a sales capacity. And so as we ran through the process of bringing that actually to market, which is where we're at now with it, initially just being able to query the data inside the structured Irys system was a win for everybody, right? That's still such a huge leap. But then you guys like love to one up it and surprise me. And you're like, well, now not only are we querying the data that's in Irys, we're going to query all of the attached documents, emails, text messages, phone recordings, like anything that's not in Irys proper data structure. And then I believe, and I hope I'm not like blowing the surprise at the end, but we can also compare multiple PDF. Like if you ask it a question about multiple PDFs, right? Like it is not just a one-to-one available to.
Yeah, it's
yeah, that's correct. You can query
anything that you have permission to see, view, and access. And to your point, Margot, when we were talking to our data earlier in the dashboard, we were talking to the structured data in the database, and now we're actually talking to the unstructured data, so that all those PDFs, all of those scans, even ultimately even imagery, we're now talking to that.
So wait, I want to clarify. So if I took a picture of a doc and I put it in here, that's readable by the generative AI, correct?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I got the VIN number. Perhaps I want the total premium.
You just really like that Ford F-150, Lindsay. I kind of wonder if you have one.
I don't. Just for clarification.
I'm just messing with you now.
And then we can dig in and say, like, more than just what is the premium or the one thing. What if we want, tell me all of the coverages and limits for the Chevy Cruze that's on that policy, instead of again having to go to find the thing to then pull up that one page where that exists. It can show us the combined liability. We've got all of the limits, and then we've got the premiums broken down for each one of those coverages as well. And then, of course, if I just wanted to know, when was the policy issued, because perhaps we need to know exactly what day they produced it. Again, the data exists on the document, so you can get to it. Never forget to thank your AI for all of its hard work. But I mean, this allows
it's got such a nice personality, doesn't it?
But I mean, so essentially, like, documents are no longer where data goes to die, which is essentially what we have always had to live with. It now makes it usable, actionable, and queryable, which is just amazing.
Lindsay, I know this is getting ready to launch with all of our customers that are currently customers, and then like widely available, I think at the end of Q1, beginning of Q2. Is there plans for the AI to be able to link back to the actual document when that does go live? Is that document available to actually then to pull up and look at the? Yeah, I see you shaking your head.
Actually link back to because the clearly the documents exist inside of Irys for it to be able to query. So yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. That's awesome. Awesome.
I think that's all she wrote.
Yeah. That's it. That's it. All the things.
That wasn't enough.
Thanks,
we're gonna push time. I know it. Awesome. Well, ladies, thank you. And we've been actively answering questions in the chat. You'll probably see me looking down and around a lot. We are going to take this recording as we do for all of our LinkedIn lives. We're going to put this up on YouTube, and we'll be sharing that through our social. So it's something that you'll be able to access later. I appreciate everyone attending. Lisa, Lindsay, I mean, the hard work, it just shows in the functionality that you guys have gone above and beyond even what we thought was possible 6 months ago, 3 months ago. And every day, I swear, it's like watching a new product that I didn't even get to know. I didn't even know half the stuff that's in the product now. So that is an amazing feat. Thank you both for joining, and thank you for everybody for watching. We are going to drop a blog right now during this live. And so that will also be available on our social. So a little write-up about some of the technical things that Lisa was discussing and Lindsay were discussing, and a link back to a lot more documentation and write-ups about what this means, how we're going to be incorporating it, and when you can expect to be able to purchase it. A lot of this is available right now, and some of it's coming online very quickly. So again, ladies, thank you so much. And I really look forward to this next LinkedIn. I'm going to start planning the next one already and see what else we can show. It's going to be great. Thank you, guys.
We love you for planning our LinkedIn lives for us, Margot. No, it was always awesome, and love the LinkedIn live format, and love all the people joining us today in the comments. Thank you guys so much for your engagement. Lindsay, as always, awesome to be part of this with you guys.